Welcome everybody. In this video, we are going to talk about how to add designs and text and similar embellishments to your designed objects in Fusion 360. Like I talked about in class, this is going to be our last Fusion 360 video of the year. That doesn't mean you're done working in Fusion 360, and that doesn't mean you're not going to learn new skills and techniques in Fusion 360. It just means that after this point, we are going to use Fusion 360 with respect to other projects. And if we need a new skill or technique, either you all can do research on that on your own, or we can work through it sort of individually in class. So you can see I have a new design, nothing on here, no sketches, and I am going to make a box. So I'm going to create a sketch. My box is going to be relatively small. It's going to be, let's say 60 by 60 millimeters. And I am going to build a wall by doing an offset face. I hit the O key, I select the curve, and I'm going to offset it by, let's say 3 millimeters. That's going to be the wall size of my box. So you can see how this sketch, when I extrude it in 3 dimensions, is going to build a box. So the outer diameter of my box is going to be 60, or the outer length of the sides of my box is going to be 63. So I'm going to extrude the side up 63 millimeters, and I'm going to make my sketch visible again. And I'm going to extrude the base in 3 millimeters. So that's going to make sure that I have an actual cube. And now it's a 63 millimeter cube, not a 60 millimeter cube, and the internal volume is 60 millimeters. So I can inspect this. I can make sure that I've done my dimensioning right, hit the I key. That's 60 millimeters there. Go down there. I can see that both of these are 60 millimeters. So I know that the interior, actually it's a cube, so I should inspect this one as well. Also 60 millimeters. I know the interior volume is a cube. Can inspect the outside, 63, 66, because it's got 2 of these. So I really, let's see, if I want this to be perfectly cubic on the outside, I need to extrude this by, I need to make my base thicker. Okay, we're going to make our base 3 millimeters thicker. And you'll notice that comes out the other direction from the sketch. So now I should have 66 external in all dimensions. And this is a good example of why you should check, because there was something I did not account for. Oh yeah, I need to do this one. There was something I didn't account for in the design. These should all be 66 millimeters now. Yep. And I had some specific things in mind. So if you do the checks inside of Fusion 360 when you're actually building it, it can save you a lot of time down the road. So I need to find there we go. So there's the interior space, and there are the sides. So I'm going to do, I'm always going to fillet stuff like this. I just think it looks a little bit better. And we're going to put a relatively small fillet on here, maybe 3 millimeters. Now, I don't want this part to be smaller internally, so I am going to fillet these as well. And if you fillet an internal edge, it's going to actually increase the volume of it. So we're going to have a nice, clean 3 millimeter edge all the way around after I fillet this as well. See, that brings it in. And so this is a pretty good box. So what I want to do with this box is I want to add a little bit of embellishment to it, because that's something we haven't really done yet. So I need to center on one of the faces, and I'm going to make sure that it is facing up. So let's center on this, rotate it this way. The opening is up here. It's snapping it back when I do that. So I'm going to do it one more time, left. So now we've got the opening facing up, and I'm going to create a new sketch on one of the faces. So you'll notice I am not selecting the plane, which is what happens when I click here. I'm selecting the face itself. It's important to make sure if you're doing modifications to a face, it's important that you actually do the sketch on the face. Okay, so helpfully it rotates it around again for me. I don't want to do that. I want to rotate it back. I want to make sure, because I'm putting a design on this, this box has a desired orientation, so I want to make sure that I'm putting my design in the correct orientation. So one of the ways I can add embellishment in Fusion 360 is to add text. And there is you can go to create, you go to text. You can do text along a path. I haven't built any paths here. If I wanted to, I could put text on the path, but For right now, I am just going to create a little box here. And you'll notice this box, you can use the guide, so you can use lines and middle points and stuff like that on your Fusion 360 drawing. You can set the height in millimeters of the text. This is a 66 millimeter tall box. 10 millimeter text looks fine. I might want to center align it. Let's see, I can rotate it, but let's let's say I want to do it this way. I want to put a little signature on it. So let's see. Okay, yeah, I want to center the text horizontally and vertically. That's going to make it a little bit easier when I try and center it on the object. And you'll notice it's actually much larger than my text box object. That's okay. I can grab this and drag it around. And I could do a line, let's see, and dimension the text with respect to the line. I'm not going to do that right here. I'm just going to go ahead and finish the sketch. And so what that gives me, and again, you can see it really doesn't like me to orient it that way. It keeps on snapping it back, but you can see this is oriented the way we wanted it to be. So I have two options for how I'm going to actually make this text show up on my object. One of those options is to press pull it out. So I can select the text as a face, and I'm going to orient this like this, and I can bring it out by 1 millimeter. If I do that, it will actually print this text as a part of the box in the plastic. 1 millimeter out, so you'll ask yourself, well, what orientation are we going to print this in? And if we print it like this, how is it going to handle the overhang on that text? It should do okay with just 1 millimeter. You might have some edges that look a little bit, let's say, worse for the wear, but this is something you'll want to just mess around with and see how it actually prints. So if you were doing this in production, what you would want to do is a smaller test where you do like a 10 by 10 millimeter cube. You put one letter on it, you either press pull it out or press pull it in the way that you want to, and see how it looks. So the other way we can get this to show up is we can press pull it in. And so instead of going 1 millimeter, I'll go -1 millimeter. Let's go -2. We need to change the operation to a cut and hit enter, and you'll notice now it is inset. It doesn't go all the way through. I can change it so it does, but you have a problem with letters when you cut all the way through. I am going to have a problem with letters that have parts that are sort of floating off in space, like this middle of the B, the middle of the E. You'll notice it creates all these extra bodies because all of a sudden I have a bunch of separate little objects here. And we don't really want to do that. So I am going to edit this feature back and change it to where it is a -2 millimeter cut. So it goes into the box but leaves a little bit of material behind it. So that I'm not going to have a bunch of little tiny parts of letters fall out when I try and print it. So that is one way you can add embellishments. And I could have used a different font. I could have done it along a path if I wanted a curved font or something like that. Those all work very well. The other thing you can do is you can actually bring in a certain type of image file. So I'm going to go ahead and reorient the shape to the way I want it. Let's see. Yeah, I want it facing up. And I am going to add another sketch on this face. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to insert what is called an SVG. So if you want to take an illustration from outside of Fusion 360 and add it to one of your printed objects, you can. It has to be a vector drawing. Without getting too much into detail, a vector drawing is a drawing that represents an image using a series of lines rather than using a series of pixels. SVG is the most common format for these. So some images that you can't bring in are things like PNGs, JPEGs, bitmaps, GIFs, stuff like that. Those are raster images. They're not vector images. You have to have a vector image because it has to be able to make those lines in the sketch. So I've downloaded, I'm going to insert from my computer, and on my desktop I have downloaded a Raspberry Pi logo, which is a very easily available vector image. Now you'll notice it comes in very large and rotated. I cannot figure out why vector images come in the size and rotations they do. There's no real rhyme or reason to it as far as I can tell. So I always just work with what I have. And you'll notice as soon as I bring it in, it gives me tools to resize it. So you got to be kind of careful when you're doing this initial part, because when you apply these scales, so I'm going to scale this down 0.5. Yeah, you only get the chance to do this once, and when you apply the scales, you'll notice I hit enter and it immediately popped it onto the drawing, and I lost my ability to scale it. You can probably do that after the fact. This is usually the last step of a project for me when I'm adding these little embellishments, so I'm usually don't have the patience to really do that. So I'm going to put in 0.5 here. I'm going to mouse off, and then I can rescale it, but I am rescaling it from this size right here. So if I did 0.5 again, it's probably going to be too small. I'm going to do 0.8. That is pretty close. I'm going to eyeball it on this. I'm going to do 0.8 again. And you'll notice this is pretty good. There probably is a way to exactly center these. I usually use these little grid lines. You can see there's very faint grid lines in the back. So what I usually do is count the grid lines and try and get it as best I can. Again, these embellishments, this is not a functional part. This is an embellishment. So if it is off by 1/10 of a millimeter, number one, that's not very visible, and number two, it's not going to cause anything to break. So I'm going to finish the sketch here, and you'll notice now I have this nice Raspberry Pi image on here that I can press pull. So I'm going to inset it by 2 millimeters again. You can see what this is going to look like when it prints. It's going to have this Raspberry Pi logo visible as an inset on this side of it. I could add another one to the other side, and I could actually do that without adding an additional sketch. If I did another press pull on this face, and I started from an offset, I want to offset it by, this thing is 66 millimeters thick, I want to offset it by -66, which is going to take it in that direction. And the way I knew to do negative is just by the way the arrow is facing. I'm going to go distance 2 millimeters, and that is going to cut. I'm going to hit OK, and now I've got a nice little symmetrical box. So I could print this out. I could use it to store it. This is probably big enough to store Raspberry Pi Zeros. And I could see what these embellishments look like, and if I liked them, I could keep it. If I didn't like them, I could redo it and print something that I felt better matched my design idea. So that is a really quick rundown of how to do embellishments, meaning import vector files and do text in Fusion 360. You will probably want to do this on your personal projects. You may want to do this. You may want to add some of your own designs, or you may want to add some text. This is also useful if you've got something that's complicated to assemble and you want to build in some assembly instructions right on the object itself, right? If you're making something that has a bunch of snap together pieces, you could label the tabs and the notches in the designer so that you didn't have to build a bunch of complicated instructions for it. So that is the last Fusion 360 video. There's no skills check for this video. Just make sure that you are using these techniques when appropriate in your design work. If you have any questions, if there's anything you don't understand, feel free to raise your hand and we will take a look at it together.